Hi, everyone. I have been devoting my career to the study of media and games for learning and health, and I bridge academe and industry, trying to bring the best of both worlds to each other so that academe has some grounding in reality, and so that reality has some grounding in theory and research. So I know Big Bird is a tough act to follow and all that warm, cuddly stuff. So I'm probably not going to be as warm and cuddly, but I'm going to talk about ways to make games effective and really touch quickly on a lot of different theories and research findings and examples of games that have used some of the strategies and principles that I think are especially important. What I want to do is branch out from thinking about games as a world in which you tell people things and they learn them, and then you evaluate whether they learned them. And in the health field, it even goes so far as to say you teach people about health and then you expect their behavior to change. And one thing that's very well known about health behavior, it's not rational. We all know how to be healthy and what we need to do, but there are so many reasons why we don't. And just giving us more information is not usually the way to get us to change our behavior. It's more based on emotions, on social relationships, on perhaps adjusting your values and goals. And those are the kinds of things I want to talk about today. How to touch people emotionally and how to get them to think about games and the content of games in such a way that they fill in gaps that you give them. If you fill in all the blanks for people, it will probably wash right over them. But if you give them something to think about and feel about that maybe doesn't draw the conclusions for you or doesn't actually explain everything, you might be interpreting what's going on. We know that great art is like that. Great art doesn't lay it all out for us. We interpret it, we think about it. With a health game, a very important strategy is to give people things to think about, but in ways in which they'll think about it in their own lives. How does this pertain to me? What's valuable to me? How can I use this? What conclusions can I draw that will lead me to behavior change? And if I go through that process, I will own that decision, and I'll be much more likely to hold more firmly to it and to follow through on it. So I know I'm preaching to the choir with this crowd. We are all pretty sophisticated about what games are. They are interactive, adaptive, immersive, impactful experiences when they're designed well. Games have all of the characteristics of media. Anything that you can think about in any medium, from television to print to AR, VR, robotics, whatever. Those kinds of digital technologies can deliver games. And what separates games from media is that a game includes challenge to reach a goal, and it provides feedback on your progress toward that goal. So that's a very fundamental, basic way of defining a game, and I know that there's a lot of controversy about how to define games, but as I look at it, those are the essential parts of games. And that it holds true no matter what new platforms we find in the near future or far future, how it's displayed, how sensors come and play a role, and what sources of data we're using to make our games. An underlying principle and strategy is to remember that media are very similar to real life. There is a growing body of research to show that we respond to media messages as if they were really happening. We have emotional responses to characters. We get aroused, we get sad, we get the range of emotions in response to well-designed media that tell us stories or that involve us in some kind of challenging way in which we're the protagonist. And that is something to hold on to as a designer of behavior change games, to say that I can trust that if I make something that has emotional content, that people are going to feel it as an experience. And of course, with games now, you can be the main character. Your avatar can be the agent who drives the game forward. So you're having a first-person experience and you're getting direct feedback about your actions in the game. So in that way, it's immersive and experiential. So we feel present in media worlds. A game can have a compelling story, but not always. It might have interactions, transactions. We might be in a simulated kind of world where we're looking at a system and how it works and playing around with changing variables and seeing what happens when let's say I'm playing around with the human body that has diabetes, and I want to change the medication or some kind of lifestyle change and see what happens to the blood sugar. Does it go too high or too low, and so forth. Games can be a building site, a construction site. They can be collaborations. They can also socially connect people, either real people or people who are embodied in avatars, or you interacting with a digital avatar that's programmed into the game, of course. And now robots and plush toys. So fundamentally, we experience media events, and that's a fundamental principle of design that we need to remember, and that our emotional responses to media events and events in real life are remarkably similar. The psychologists who are looking at how we evolved, evolutionary psychologists, will say that our brains are not wired to really tell the difference between media and real life. I want to take a brief sidestep to what the researcher can contribute to the design of games. We'll get back to principles, but a researcher on the team I broke it down into 7 kinds of things that researchers can do. The researcher can specify the game concept and goals. And this is one of the most important things that a researcher on your team can do. And I find that when I'm an advisor to projects that are already well underway, and I ask a simple question like, well, what are the goals of this game? What do you want your players to learn or to feel or to change? And very often the team does not have a clear concept. They have not really thought this through. They have a general idea that if you just expose the player to the topic, that by osmosis they're going to get better at the behavior. And it's a time-consuming and in-depth kind of process in most cases to really hone in on just a few goals that are the best goals for you to address in your game. And so the researcher can help you by bringing the evidence to bear on which goals are likely to lead to behavior change and how to address those goals with what kinds of game mechanics or characters or storyline or other kinds of challenges. Secondly, after figuring out what the concept of the game and the goals are, what are the strategies you're going to use to achieve the goals? And then very quickly, the researcher can also help write proposals for grants, for investments or gifts that you might be seeking, and add that flavor of we are evidence-based in our design of our media. And that is a good selling point. And especially if you're looking for a grant where the granting agency is going to want to know, have you thought through what you're doing? The researcher can then lay out the plan in the proposal as to how the evidence has been used, how the research findings have been applied to the design of the game, so that there's very good confidence that you're heading in the right direction. Play testing and game revision during production. I need not say this to this crowd, how important that is. Sesame Street really set the standard for that. I was fortunate enough to work with the Sesame Street researchers in the early 70s, a few years after Sesame Street arrived on the scene. At Harvard, the researchers and producers were teaching in a graduate program there where I got a master's degree in education. And I was hired to go out and test segments of Sesame Street and other children's programming with the kids that come back and always redesign based on, let's make it better, more effective, more understandable, and so forth. Evaluation research, what are the outcomes? And of course, you test the outcomes that you designed for the whole way through. You want to publish and present evaluation research findings about what your game has accomplished. And you want to help the design team keep up with current research. So in some cases, the researcher can be hired to just stay abreast of the literature in the areas that the design team is very interested in. So moving very quickly, specifying the game concept and goals. You want to also know your target players. And I'll just quickly go through this list because I'm short of time. But what are their interests, abilities? What is the culture of this group? Not only ethnically, but maybe socioeconomically, or maybe in terms of what they think is cool. Also, how they relate to health. Maybe being healthy is not cool in this culture that you're designing for. What are the self-concepts of your target player group? Are they confident about, preventing a health problem or managing a chronic condition or adhering to the doctor's treatment plan? Or are they unsure and not confident at all that they could carry it through? Where do they live in the media world? What game platforms and genres do they prefer? Is your game going to be in a formal setting where there's a teacher and a curriculum and you're at school or a health class? Or is it an informal setting during leisure time? Very different games that you might make in those two instances. What are the current health behaviors and health risks of your target group? And what are the barriers to good health behaviors? What are the things that they just can't overcome that gets them over the line to be healthy and to have good habits? And do they even want to improve this health behavior? Or are you actually in a position where one of your first chores is to get them involved, get them engaged, get them interested in becoming better at this health behavior? Maybe your target population, for example, doesn't feel they need to worry about nutrition. And they don't see any reason why, what they eat matters. So maybe that's where you start, is getting them engaged in this so that not only will they care more about the game, but it will carry over beyond the game into their real life. And remember, your players are going to be great design partners because they'll tell you what's cool and what's not and what will work and what's not. I have war stories about well-meaning game designers who didn't ask the players what they liked, and they came up with the most ridiculous game premises you ever saw. Another point I want to make is with health games especially, your medical specialists in the area that you're dealing with are so vital to your success. I would ask, I made a game for diabetes self-management, asthma self-management, smoking prevention, sickle cell, cystic fibrosis. In each case, ask the doctors, the nurses, the health educators, what are the half dozen things you want your patients to do better? If you could wave a magic wand, what would it be? And really, that's all I want to say about this, but I have, a list of the things you could ask them, the behaviors, the knowledge, the attitudes, the self-concepts, and so forth. Then once you've kind of narrowed it down, okay, these are the 3 top things that the doctors tell me we should really zero in on. Which of these could a game really address well? Or maybe these are 3 things that all don't go together in a game, so let's pick 1 or 2 and make one game about that. And then, of course, then you've got your goals. So I'm going to skip over some things because I know I'm going to run out of time. But you want to know, how will gameplay enhance the outcomes? Will the game have to stand alone, or is it going to be integrated with other media as a part of a campaign? And then your game doesn't have to do all the heavy lifting. Your game can zero in on maybe one aspect of the campaign that a game can address very well. But then your media and your direct experience and your social media can handle some of the other aspects of your campaign. Mediating factors. The sexiest thing you can do is say, we made this game, and here we have measures of better health, right? Well, sometimes that's too ambitious, your budget, your timing, whatever. But it is okay for you to go backwards on this chain and say, well, if we can just show that we changed a certain behavior, and there's evidence to show that, for example, physical activity leads to good health outcomes, or stopping smoking leads to good health outcomes, that is a legitimate outcome. Back up a little bit more, mediating factors, the kinds of things that make or break that behavior change. Maybe, for example, and here's some possible mediating factors, perceived susceptibility. Maybe your target audience doesn't even think they're susceptible to the problem, right? And that is a deal breaker. If your audience doesn't think that this pertains to them, the best game in the world won't matter because that's not about in the early to mid 80s, there was a very rudimentary game called AIDS Roulette, which was meant to show cumulative probabilities of getting AIDS if you have unprotected sex in those days. And so the player would, every time there was unprotected sex, the roulette wheel would spin, and eventually everybody would get AIDS. And so it's just a direct experience on what your risk might be. Perceived stigma. With a diabetes game, what we learned was teens and kids with type 1 diabetes felt stigmatized by having this chronic condition. They thought that socially they'd be rejected if other kids knew they had diabetes, so they wouldn't self-care in front of their friends. But we decided, well, we knew that kids really couldn't care less if their friend had diabetes or not. So in the game, we made a 2-player cooperative version of the game so that the child with diabetes would be likely to play with their friend who doesn't have diabetes. And they soon saw that, I don't have to worry about it. I can measure my blood glucose. I can refuse sugary foods. I can eat a snack when my sugar is feeling low. And all of that in front of my friends, and I won't be seen as a pariah. And that had no didactic content. We didn't use the word stigma. We didn't talk about, hey, you may feel different from other children. No, it was just an experience that made them feel, you know what, I'm fine. It might be a skill to develop. Our asthma specialist, pediatric asthma specialist, when we developed Bronchi, the Bronchiosaurus for asthma, told us that their number one thing that they wanted their young patients to do was to learn how to use an inhaler correctly. So in the game, we addressed that quite vigorously, and that was something that we were able to deliver. Self-efficacy and response efficacy are also mediating factors that can make or break whether any effects are going to happen at all. Response efficacy has to do with, if I use my inhaler, is it going to make me healthier? A lot of people don't think that meds are going to make any difference, right? Or if I lose weight or I exercise, am I really going to be healthier? So you might want to design a game that simply addresses that notion that there are good outcomes that come from the behavior change. And you might go into greater depth when you make a plan for your game as to what your game will have, what the mediating factors are in those 4 boxes. And how does that lead to better behaviors and better health? So I want to skip a few things because I'm short on time. I'm going to talk about all of these things. You notice learning is only one of the 7. So a lot of the things that the games can address have to do with emotions, right? And motivation and attitudes. Learning facts is only one part of behavior change, especially when it comes to health. So how do you engage people? Well, one theoretical area is called ELM, the Elaboration Likelihood Model, where we're looking at whether people are likely to be involved in the topic, right? There are two kinds of people in the world when it comes to behavior change, those who care and those who don't care. And that you better know about your target audience, because if they don't care, you have to work on that. If they do care, you can start giving them all kinds of tips and tricks and information and really move forward with them very well. Transportation theory has to do with does your game, does your media, do your media transport the person, put them in a state of flow, take them out of their current surroundings and really engage them in what they're doing. So that's a strategy in any kind of game you make. How engaging is it? Another very important thread to have throughout your game design is homophily, which has to do with the fact that we look at role models and other characters who are a lot like us. And it's not only in terms of age or gender or race, but it also has to do perhaps with your health condition. I'd like to have role models who also have diabetes if I have diabetes, or other subculture kinds of things. So I pay attention to characters who are like me. And then a whole area of research has to do with self-referential encoding. If I can learn about something as it pertains to me, so if you can make your media very tailored, individualized, particular to the person, they feel they're getting something that really pertains to their life. And they also judge the quality of the game and the media much higher because they're getting delivered to them what they really need. So there are other areas that are similar. When you're tailoring media, you're personalizing it, you're making it adaptive, and so forth. And I'm showing, by the way, UNICEF Kid Power game features to highlight what I'm talking about in these past two slides. I'll just gloss over this. Social connection is incredibly engaging. You know, other people really motivate us. I won't go into self-determination theory. Afterwards, by the way, we're going to be able to move over to the cafeteria area, and I'd be glad to answer more questions. We're going to have to get out of this room. But talk about self-determination theory. Look it up. Here's a leaderboard from Kid Power, very powerful. I worked with them on evaluating Kid Power, and the teachers and the kids loved, well, first of all, they loved the whole program, and they rated it very highly. But that leaderboard was their home base. How are we doing compared to everybody else? And it was really a motivator. So motivation, really important thread is points, badges, power-ups. Those are extrinsic motivators. It has nothing to do with my needs for behavior change. I'm being given a carrot, right, that's going to reward me for my good behavior. And that's fun. We love that kind of thing in games. But if that's all you do, if it's like gamification, we're just going to make you do something that's not a game and we're going to turn it into a game by giving you points and badges. The psychological research shows us that it wears thin very quickly, and it can even backfire and turn into lower motivation. I'm just doing this for the points. But if you can tie in the person's underlying values, their goals, and remind them of that when you give them feedback and when you reward them, you know, hey, you know, you lost 5 pounds last month, and here are all the great things it's going to do for you. And if I know what motivates you, you know, why are you losing the weight? I can use that in the feedback, and that can be very powerful. The work on avatars is fantastic. I'll just show you the one at the bottom here. These aspirational avatars. You can see yourself as you are now, but you're thinking about the future. There are games that can let people talk about what they aspire to be, and then the game can lead them in that direction. But in this case, at Stanford, there was a study where they randomly assigned people to either look at an avatar that was their young face, it's actually their image, or they saw an aged version of their face, and they were learning about how to save for retirement in old age. And guess what? The ones who saw the older face of theirs, who was going to put a higher percentage of their savings into retirement? Their young self or their old self? Their old self, right? But we need research to confirm that for us, right? But absolutely important. Here is Remission by Hope Lab, one of the great health games ever made, and it goes inside the human body, and you're taking care of a character. Very powerful way to deliver health messages, where you're helping the character get well, and you're treating them. This is a game for teens and young adults who have cancer, and the goal is to get them to adhere to their treatment plan. It was very successful in achieving that, and one of the mediating variables was self-efficacy. They found self-efficacy and knowledge gain, and a very powerful way to learn. It gives you a procedural rhetoric. Games give you cause-effect. I'm out of time. I've got to wrap it up. Cause and effect. That is an important message. The game telling you, if you do A, what happens? And a lot of commercial popular games tell you if you commit crimes, nothing will happen to you. Or if you drink a lot, you'll still be able to drive just fine. All right, so let me see if there's anything here. This fantastic game. I understand that it's on the program, Hellblade. The idea of becoming your avatar And this game makes you think like a character who is psychotic and sees images, hears voices. The world around her is from her head. But to win the game, you have to think like a psychotic. You have to think like her. And mental health professionals learn about this problem by embodying that. Can you just apply that to so many other situations where you have to win the game by being the person who has a certain issue? I gotta go. Let me see. Let me slide. I want to end with a proverb. Communicating with your doctors. I'll even skip this. Didactic content is the least of it. Telling people what to do, forget it. Okay. I'll stop here. People are taking pictures of these slides, I see. Oh, we're not, I hate the word stealth learning. Learning can be fun. Let's make it fun and put it out front if you want people to learn, if you want them to solve problems, that's what they're doing. Good teachers always set it up that the students are motivated to do that. And the idea that the learning is broccoli and we're covering it with chocolate sauce and it doesn't work. So last slide. Tell me and I forget. Show me and I remember. Involve me and I understand. That's what your game should do. So thank you. Sorry I went long. Thank you very much.